Black Friday is coming, and as hard or industrial techno producer you want to know what tools will help you making pounding kick drums best. Or maybe you just wanted to buy the famous iZotope Trash 2, but since that's impossible anymore, you look for the best alternative. In this ultimate review, 7 plugins will have only one job: to distort the same kick as best as they can. I'm going to briefly review each plugin and highlight their good and bad sides so you will know which plugin suits your needs best. Our starting point is the kick drum made with iZotope Trash 2. By the way, this kick comes from my Hard Slush Industrial Techno Sample and Serum preset pack, and here is the same kick drum with different distortion plugins we will check out today. Before we begin, this video is not sponsored by anyone, and because no one pays for what I'm saying here, I will say only my honest thoughts and opinions. The second thing is that most of the plugins here are very versatile and can give similar results even if their workflow or distortion approach is different. When buying the plugin for yourself, and if you are going to do that, you can use my affiliate links from the description, focus most on the workflow and on whether the plugin suits your production style or not. For example, I love crunchy kick drums that remind of even industrial hardcore techno music, and because of that I need a wave shaper distortion plugin with a few distortion stages and vast equalization capabilities. Because of that I wouldn't be satisfied with the Berzerk by Waves, as it has only a single distortion stage and its equalizer is simple and I can use it only to equalize the sound after distortion. But if I wanted from the plugin to distort the kick quite heavily while keeping a warm sound, then the same Berzerk would sound more appealing to me. Of course, the Berzerk, as any other plugin, will be useful in at least few other situations like percussion group saturation, but in this video we are strictly focused on using the plugins to distort the kick drum. We are kicking things off with the plugin I had most fun with, the Arturia Dist Coldfire. It has 2 distortion modules and each of them can perform light saturation with, for example, tube, tape and transistor distortion types, noisy and crunchy distortion with types like bit inverter or bit crusher, and anything in between with wave folder and wave shaper distortion. The current kick uses a wave folder distortion twice to get a powerful sound, but look how easily I can make the kick softer or more noisy by just tweaking one of them. Flexible routing is a strong side of this plugin. It's the only effect where I can use the swap button that immediately switches distortion modules order. That works best with serial routing that is currently selected. This single button can quickly create a different kick sound. Other common routing options are available along with simple multiband processing that unfortunately is still a no match for FabFilter Saturn 2, we will see soon. What shapes distortion greatly is an equalizer or a filter before the distortion. Coldfire got you covered with 4 individual filters placed before and after each distortion module, giving a huge control over the sound, especially if you set the routing to parallel. The pre-filter section is fast, and aside from a simple low or high pass filters like in most plugins, we do have other filter types that with large resonance can make any sound crazy. The feedback section is a place where we can get an extra texture for the kick drum from. Mostly it feeds the plugin output back to the input after a time delay, and this is what happens in Coldfire. What I like is the fact I can route the feedback signal to either distortion module A or B alone, or to both of them. What you hear now is the feedback signal only. To get rid of that, I can use the feedback mute switch that immediately cuts off the feedback once the kick stops playing. Sometimes I wish Isotope Trash 2 had a similar thing, because when using Trash 2, I have to manually mute the kick by using an automation to get the same effect. Close to the feedback, we have the dynamics section equipped with a limiter, compressor and a multiband compressor that is most useful. It's cool that I can also route the dynamics module to be either before or after the distortion. At last, like in most FabFilter plugins, we have a possibility to copy the distortion settings to a second slot to freely make A/B comparisons. Is there anything I don't like about Coldfire? The plugin definitely could have assignable macros to which I can attach a few plugin parameters to quickly create overkick variations with ease. A plugin like this could also have a simple way to create a stereo kick out of a mono one. Sometimes a white kick just fits better. Though I can select the stereo routing which will assign the distortion modules to the left and right channels respectively, and the difference in either pre-filter or distortion settings will create a stereo image. That stereo image sounds unnatural and also limits the distortion capabilities a lot. That's bad news. I can recommend Arturia Coldfire to producers that want a versatile plugin for both saturation and heavy distortion jobs. Its complexity will make you spend hours in front of this effect, so to make use of its full potential, you need to be rather an intermediate producer. The next on the list is the plugin for those who love rumble kick drums with lots of fat low end that should be carefully sculpted. The FabFilter Saturn 2 tells you right from the beginning, I am the best effect to carry out surgical saturation. What makes this plugin suited for such a job? At first, the multiband processing that is the most advanced among all the plugins we will use today. Saturn 2 allows you to use up to 6 frequency bands for individual processing. How to make use of them? Suppose we want the kick drum to sound rumbly. I will make use of tape saturation to beef up the whole kick. The low end got beefed up indeed, but the highs got unnecessarily distorted too. To fix that, I can split the frequency range into two and apply the same saturation but only on the low end. Now imagine I want to leave the fat low end untouched while giving the rest of the frequencies a guitar-like texture. With Saturn 2, amp distortion is possible too. You could notice the volume doesn't change drastically even when I use lots of drive. The drive knob has an auto gain feature that compensates automatically any volume difference. Though to squeeze into the sound lots of crunch like an Arturia Coldfire, we have to bump up the output level of each frequency band processed. The end result of such distortion can sound like this. Because of lack of high or low pass filters with adjustable resonance and wave shaper distortion capabilities like we had in Coldfire, heavy distortion is more difficult to achieve in Saturn II, but it's not impossible. I will give you another example of saturation to show you even more power of the multiband processing, which is the key of this plugin. In the same kick drum, I saturate the low end to make the kick fatter. The rest of the frequencies will use a guitar amplification. I want that guitar amplification to be hearable only in the beginning of the kick, so I attach an envelope to modulate the drive knob in time. Of course, few other distortion plugins from today's video have such modulations possible, so it's not only the FabFilter's specialty. That would be the prepared kick drum, which low end I want to sculpt, like I mentioned in the beginning. Now look what does Saturn II has to offer. The filters for frequency split have adjustable slope to split the frequencies more precisely. Changing this affects both low end and the transient part of the kick. The second thing is the linear phase mode that prevents any phase shifts that could hurt the low end. Please note that the linear phase feature relates only to the multiband processing and frequency split, and it doesn't have anything in common with the post EQ section that each distortion band has. The third thing is the large oversampling capabilities. With superb setting, the oversampling goes up to 32x. It means that the distortion, especially in the high-end area, can sound more clean and transparent. Again, a perfect solution for deep rumbly kicks with a crunchy transient. What else I like in the Saturn II? A-B comparison feature like in the Coldfire. I mentioned earlier post EQ section for rough equalization. Knob behavior is versatile. I can type values in decimal numbers, percents, and even frequencies and symbols. What I wish Saturn II had is wave shaper or wave folder distortion algorithms that would make this effect suited for aggressive distortion better. On the other hand, we have quality tube, tape, and transformer distortion styles that remind of an iconic exciter module from Isotope Ozone mastering suite. Even amp distortion is present, which is rare. I can recommend Saturn II for producers that, again, love deep rumbly kicks, but I can also see myself using this plugin with success while mixing or even mastering. Multiband processing, linear phase mode, and great tape tube models will suit group processing perfectly. The third on the list is the Rift by Minimal Audio. Regarding the distortion algorithms, it's the opposite of the Saturn II. Rift is filled with wave shaper distortion that aims for noise, crunch, and destruction. We have two distortion modules that distort separately the positive and negative portion of a waveform. This is called bipolar distortion that is present in the discontinued Isotope Trash 2 as well. That approach is unique and gives more possibilities for distortion. The section above the oscilloscope allows you to adjust the blend of both distortion modules, and that works a bit like a dry-wet control for each of these modules, and to increase the distortion stages, multiplying the amount of ground you get. The middle section also has something that any other plugin, besides thermal by output, doesn't have. It's the wide processing mode that can take a mono kick drum and create a mono-compatible and transparent stereo image without limiting the plugin's distortion capabilities. We also have assignable macros, which are not seen often too. The Rift has a few more advantages, where the filter section is the largest one. Do you remember by how much we could change the sound by using the pre-filter section in Coldfire? Rift gives even more possibilities, making its filter section nearly as good as in the Xfer Serum synthesizer. Of course, there's only one filter here instead of 4 like in the Coldfire, but this filter can be freely placed before or after the distortion, and we have much more filter types. My favorite one is the Very Notch that can quickly create an uptempo or hardstyle like kick. I know, it's not very techno, but imagine the possibilities. The feedback section is available as well, so unfortunately that feedback signal can't be distorted as hard as in the Coldfire plugin. This can make achieving more textured kick drums harder. Also, the plugin can't mute the feedback automatically, like in Coldfire, so I think the feedback section here could be better. Another thing I don't like in Rift is the multiband processing. Such processing is available, but when I turn it on, I can only adjust the crossover filters and volume levels of each band. On the bottom, we can turn on and off multiband processing for individual modules, but even the manual doesn't state what does it work like. My guess is that whatever is turned on gets to process only the middle band. If a module is turned off, it processes the whole sound as if the multiband processing was turned off. Compared to Saturn II, this part of the plugin is very basic. I can recommend the Rift for producers that, again, want some versatility from their Distortion plugin. If you are interested in creating unique and not typical for techno music kick drums, pick this plugin over the Arturia Coldfire. If you are interested in more industrial techno and crunchy sounds like kicks, I think the Coldfire by Arturia will be a better and slightly cheaper choice. Another candidate for noisy kick drums is the Thermal by Output. It greets us right from the beginning with an XY controller that is linked to two assignable macros. Switch to the advanced view and you will discover that Thermal gives us 3 distortion stages chained one after another. Each distortion stage is a wave shaper or wave folder distortion unit that comes with its own low and high pass filters. Unfortunately without adjustable resonance. We also have an extra bit reduction dab within each distortion stage. There is no either parallel or multiband processing available, like in Saturn II or Rift. The closest you can get to multiband processing is to use a single distortion stage for each frequency range you manually set up with low and high pass filters, but it limits a bit plugin's distortion capabilities. Let's play around with the kick to see what we can get out of these 3 distortion stages. As you could see, I used Thermal's feedback section to fill the gig a bit more, so the feedback section isn't as advanced as in either Rift or Coldfire. So, is there anything interesting Thermal has to offer aside from 3 distortion stages chained together? Thermal also has the stereo image section where you can create a stereo sound out of the mono one, similarly as in the Rift. There is one drawback though. While Rift creates the stereo image by inverting the multipolar processing, which gives a natural sound, Thermal probably just uses the haze effect that with larger amounts can sound unnatural. It's interesting that each distortion stage has its own stereo image section, as well as a simple equalizer with just a low and high shelf filters. To sum things up, the filter section could be more advanced, at least there could be resonance controls for the filters, and the equalization section could at least look like in the X-Verse Serum synthesizer. We can't expect from this plugin any guitar amplification or tube tape saturation models like we have seen in FabFilter Saturn 2, but at least the wave shaper distortion is quite flexible here. Lack of parallel or limited multiband functionality is also a drawback. What surprised me, its lack of dry wet controls for each distortion stage, which could be useful sometimes. We can create a stereo image out of a mono signal and automatically compensate the volume difference when using the drive, but come on, this plugin costs 150 euros. It's advertised as cutting-edge distortion plugin, but instead of jaw-breaking distortion, I am getting effects like chorus, danger or phaser, totally useless when distorting kick drums. It might sound like I'm being rude, but if you knew that right before Isotope Trash 2 got withdrawn from sale, you could buy it for as low as 13 euros on Plugin Boutique, well, one can feel deceived. So, who I can recommend the Thermal plugin for? Maybe for someone that owns a limited version of a DAW, like Ableton Live Lite, and wants a distortion effect that can be used for different purposes on different sounds. But if you want to make Raxella or PSLS style kicks with this plugin, buy anything else I have covered earlier. The next plugin is the Berzerk by Waves. We are slowly entering the field of cheaper but more limited plugins. At the moment of recording, the Berzerk costs $29. Is it worth that price? At our disposal, we have a single wave shaper or wavefolding distortion stage with 10 different algorithms available and a high definition switch that enables 8x oversampling, almost 4 times less as Saturn 2 offers. It doesn't seem much, but the distortion coming from each of these algorithms can be shaped with the input, drive, yes, these two knobs give their own sound when turned up, and density that mostly adds more noise and crackle. For a pleasant sound, keep this knob turned down. An interesting feature might be the go button that with each press generates a slightly altered version of the same distortion algorithm. Please note that this function requires the density knob to be used. Without that, forget about distortion randomization. So far, so good. While we don't have many distortion algorithms, these combined with both input and drive deliver quite solid distortion. Now let me show you a bit ridiculous and a bit unintuitive part of this plugin, the feedback section. When the feedback type is set to sine, it's just a pitch modulated sine wave generator that is supposed to do what? Laser effects? Fortunately, when we change the type to input, then the feedback section can give you a pleasant warm crunch to the sound. Extra functionality includes the dynamics section that controls the sound before passing it to the drive section. You can't use it to control the dynamics of the output. In Arturia Coldfire we could decide where we place the dynamics section, but you can use it to, for example, pump more distortion for the transient part of the kick, something what an envelope follower could do as well. At last, there is a simple equalizer section, but unfortunately there isn't any low or high pass filter available. I found the Berzerk to give a very warm sound where the crunch and distortion doesn't have to be filled with lots of high frequencies, so it's difficult to make the Berzerk sound too annoying. If you'd like to try that though and experiment with this plugin, remember you can always hit undo or simply use the AP feature as a backup. If warmth is your goal, then I can recommend you this plugin, unless the price of it goes back to 99 euros. The current price is in my opinion great because usually Waves likes to charge you more for say marketing and brand itself. The second last plugin in my list is the Pyros by Audiority. It gave me an impression of a plugin that can either distort the sound too much, given large amounts of noise and crunch, or slightly saturate it. We have 25 different wave shaper distortion algorithms, that's 2.5 times more than in Berzerk, and each algorithm is shaped with 4 controls: the drive, strength, bias, and the feedback. Please note that feedback here is just a single knob. It's not that kind of feedback we have seen in all previous effects. What I like is that distortion algorithms have their own power rating, which helps picking the right type quicker. We even have a simple high pass filter that precedes the distortion section. The output can be clipped in either soft or hard manner. Hard one gives slightly more high-end, so I don't think it's necessary for this particular plugin that already delivers lots of noise. We also have a simple envelope follower, a dry wet control, and that's it. This plugin costs 45 euros, but considering its little versatility, I wouldn't recommend you to buy it. Either try to replace it with some freeware plugins, or save up more cash and buy something of a much higher quality. Talking about the freeware, I'd like to show you the Ruina by Noise Engineering. It's a simple plugin that, similarly as the covered earlier Pyros, gives you rather fundamental ways to distort the sound, including multiband saturation, overdrive, or wavefold distortion. Phase fader can create a stereo sound out of the mono one. And that stereo sound is still mono compatible. I think I could even say that this plugin carries out stereo image control better than thermal by output. For further control over distortion, you can use the flow menu to change the signal chain, and in the end you have a notch and a bandpass filter. But I'm afraid that's one of the least useful things in this plugin, especially since it seems like the filtering comes after the distortion, so we can't shape the distortion itself with it. Because it's a free plugin, I decided to give it some handicap. To extend its possibilities, I paired the Ruina with a freeware DDR Nova equalizer. Of course, the same equalizer could be used before any other plugin from today's video. In the equalizer, I create something that reminds me a bit of the very notch filter from the Rift plugin. 2 resonant peaks and a notch. A simple EQ like that changes the distortion itself. I can recommend the Ruina itself to anyone who just starts out and doesn't want to spend any money yet.